Good morning, everybody, and privileged to be here. I think it's a apt topic to start the panel discussions for today, because in a way, if you really look at the rest of the panel discussions, in some form or the other, they are subsets of the first panel discussion, and therefore, I think it's a great way to start. Uh, I think we heard the Honorable Chief Guest in the morning give an online address, and I think two words that really stand out, or two defining moments that really stand out in the Indian education space, is the word NEP, or the National Education Policy 2020, and pandemic. I think that came out very strongly. Uh, Within the pandemic, of course, we can't anymore talk just the word pandemic. I think our children and all the entire ecosystem has gone through three real buckets. There's a pre-pandemic, then there is during the pandemic, and now we have entered into the post-pandemic. Although, honestly, I don't think COVID is going to disappear, but in a way, it is a post-pandemic period that we're going through. And I think this entire journey has changed the way we actually look at things. But I think, what's important is that whatever happens, eventually, all of us in some form or the other are in this sector because we're here to add value to our children and to make them into a better adult as they get into the world or into the ecosystem. So I think it's good to know that we're having a topic which talks about how we can really make them future ready by integrating skills into our schools. I'm not really going to touch upon the colleges and the higher education. I think we're all going to discuss more on the school space. In the government sector, actually, this already exists. Government school children, right from grade 6, undergo skilling under the National Skill Quality Framework by NSDC. And I think if you really package all of this, and I don't know how many of you have noticed, but for the first time, I think we have a minister who is looking after education as well as skill and entrepreneurship, which is good, because earlier we had two different ministers. So if you really package all this and really try and understand what we're really going to do to try and integrate skills to make children future ready, I think the thoughts that all of you will bring out in today's session will be very, very valuable, because each of you have got some grand exposure behind you. So I'm going to start with you, Sumit. We all are entering into an ecosystem or an environment which they call as VUCA, right? So there is vulnerability, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. Of course, I'd like to add an alphabet called O, which is opportunity. But I think VUCA is going to define us now. It's only going to get more and more complex as the world opens up. And certainly for the children who have now gone through this period of pandemic and as they start stepping into the outer world. So my question to you is just to set the context. One, do you believe that we are in a VUCA stage? Is there really a lot of vulnerability around and complexity around? And two, if you do believe in it, what do you believe are the skills that we really need to impart in schooling, which are going to make these kids ready for the future?
Thank you, and a very good morning to all of you and to my co-panelists as well. I think there is no myth to the fact that there is a VUCA world. It pre-existed before the pandemic. If one were to define it, as you said, three buckets: the BCE, the before COVID era, the during COVID era, and the so-called ACE, or the after COVID era. VUCA has been a part of what we've all been through and continue to go through. I think it's not the uncertainty, the volatility, and the ambiguity, but it's the absence of it which is where the focus is. Schools typically, not just in the national landscape, but globally at times, have focused on a very S2, C2 kind of a model. Schools are stable. They start with a bell, there is a drill, and you go through that particular motion repeatedly. Schools are simple. You have a mechanism in place, perhaps influenced by the Industrial Revolution, an assembly line of production. We are all known by the batches that we passed out of, and that's probably one of our safest identities. Schools are clear, about this is the path you take. It's more like a binary situation. You do this, this is the outcome. You do not do it, there is a different outcome that you get. And schools have largely been very concise in what they have delivered because it's an initiation into what life unfolds for you. So moving from that stable, secure, clear and concise model, when life suddenly throws challenges at you, where there is a report card for sure, but there is not necessarily a timetable, there is definitely not a syllabus, and there is no date sheet that comes to you saying tomorrow is physics, 8 a.m., and then day after, math. It can come as a combination of challenges and a multiplicity of areas that it comes to you from. At that stage, the skills that you look for are not necessarily your curriculum, your syllabi, and your content. Those are skills of survival, of resilience, and of being able to hold your ground when you are prone to a multitude of situations. For us as schools, I think that has been the message, at least for the last quarter of a century. If I recall, and I'm not mistaken, it was close to the year 2000 or thereabouts that we heard Mr. Azim Premji from Wipro talk about the fact that most Indian graduates are unemployable. Probably he spoke ahead of time, probably he spoke from the skill set requirement that his or the other industries at that time were grappling with. But that was the first official, formal recognition that apart from academics, you had to have more built into a school ecosystem. And ever since then, or even prior, efforts have been part of what the new education policy is formally transposing, as you rightly pointed out and Mr. Mittal mentioned about, that there has to be an amalgamation of these, and they are not, as Dr. Filoria also mentioned, they are not silos that you work in, but they are interdisciplinary. And I think there, when you start looking at schools, when you start looking at what you require, yes, certainly skills of resilience come into play as critical ones. Skills of collaboration come into ones as critical ones. And there is a huge inventory of 21st century skills that I'm sure everyone here is familiar with. But more important, that I passionately believe in as a growing nation, as a nation which is steadily, though not necessarily in the best of ways, moved from 1 on 6 persons on this planet to 1 on 5. We need to focus on parameters which do not limit ourselves to academic well-being, but socio-emotional well-being, the emotional quotient, the health quotient. As a nation, I think there is very little focus that is put in at the school level on teaching our children how to look after themselves, how to look after their health, both physical and emotional. India should not take pride in the fact that we have the largest number of diabetics in this world. Unfortunately, some of them could be sitting in this room. But we have allowed that to happen because we prioritized perhaps economic progress over our own well-being. Similarly, I think as a nation that has the right and the opportunity, the word that you caught on after VUCA, is towards a sustainable planet, one being one planet. There is no planet B. The world today is showing itself a mirror, and an ugly one at that, of looking at the sustainable development goals. But we have had a sustainable economy. There are times when we all would have received, and I'm just talking of one simple instance, lots of memes. Where do you find maximum plastic in an Indian household? Behind the kitchen door. That's been our practice. It's not something which is insane, but yes, when the West tells you that, it's suddenly a catchphrase. So perhaps another paradox that we start nationalizing and revolutionizing ourselves by looking inwards. We've been a nation, a society who has believed in understanding things and doing them not necessarily because someone else says so. And to do that, I think the elements of the outdoor world, of adventure, of being with nature, is again an integral skill that we must work towards. So, just a lot of things, but yes, probably some of these which we could imbibe.
Thank you. I think it's a great opener. Schools take you through the beaten track. World outside is not exactly that. And therefore, we need to integrate some key skills, especially areas like resilience, collaboration, etc. Point taken on all areas. On a lighter note, the point on one planet, one being, Mr. Elon Musk may not necessarily agree with you on that. He wants another planet and he wants many beings. But I think, if you really look at what you have just said, and Ms. Mathur, if I move to you, you're an academician, you run the Navy school. Can you really bring in that innovation in pedagogy today to try and infuse what Sumit mentioned? Because ultimately, an academician inside a classroom has got a set plan. They got to take the children through a set process and get the children to undergo a set goal. How do you parallelly integrate some of this into the main ecosystem of schooling and classroom? So it involves innovation. And I remember you had mentioned about what you call as the 3 H's, the head, the heart, and the hands. Now you package all this, get your basic education delivery going, and infuse what Sumit just mentioned. How does one pull this off inside a school?
Thank you so much. Good morning to everyone. So education, when we don't see, till now, let's talk about what has been happening in education. That was basically a teacher in the conventional setup, sitting, speaking, or standing speaking, and everybody else listening. Now world is changing, and as 21st century, to make children equipped to exist as well as dwell and thrive in 21st century, they need to speak. So communication has to be, is the prime goal. Now, if we don't allow our children to speak, how will they learn to speak? So whatever goals we have in education, they have to be taught in a very subtle manner in our classrooms. Now, how does that happen? Because we are not used to that kind of a system. If we consider the education as a whole package, as you just stated, it is the education of head, heart, and hands. Now let's talk about head first. Head as in mind, brain. Now we must understand how our minds work, the physiology of our brains. Our brains are neuroplastic. Means whatever we do and whatever we repeatedly do, it retains that. Not just retains, it can think ahead on it. It can innovate. So this is what we have to catch on. All of our behaviors, all of our exposures, all of our experiences lead to a deep thinking about various aspects. And that is what innovates. That's one thing. Now, in our classroom, there are 40, on an average, there are 40 children. All 40 are being taught by the same teacher, but the response, the learning of each child is different. From that classroom only, somebody is passing with 97 or 100% marks, the other person is not able to get 33%. So for that, we need to understand how learning takes place. Now, learning, it takes place by one's own self. Some children are auditory learners. They learn by understanding, by listening. There are others who are visual. They want to see, and then they learn. There are still others who will learn only when an action happens in the class. There is an activity happening. Only then they'll learn. Then there are still others who will have to perform. Just seeing that activity is not enough for them. They have to perform that. That's their need. That's the ability that they have. So a teacher in a classroom has to be pluralistic in her approach. That means the same concept has to be taught in various ways so that all her or his students learn it and learn it effectively. Now, is it possible, humanly possible for a teacher to do that? So what is the way out? The way out is flip it. The flipping classroom means let the learner lead the learning. Let all the children. So look at the resources. All 40 become the resources. They talk about it. They discuss. And when we are doing that, like just before that, Mr. Sumit said, collaboration happens. The fear goes. See, in a classroom, if our children are fearful, they are hesitant, they are not able to speak because they feel that they'll be ridiculed or they'll be made fun of. Or it's very simple, how can I ask that? Or this is not what everybody else is thinking, how can I be thinking it? And I'm guilty about it, thinking differently. So that means that kind of a classroom can never innovate. And what is our need? The need for 21st century is we innovate. Gone are the days when those aha moments were there, when discovery was made by a single person. Now you see everyday newspaper, discoveries, the innovations are coming by teams. Why? Because all those that was to be discovered by a single, maybe most of it has already been discovered. Now the teams are coming, many minds are needed for something to be discovered, new methods to be evolved. So collaboration. When will collaboration come? When our classrooms are fearless classrooms. When the teacher and the peers allow everybody to speak or to write. It's a retake, where in the classroom where the retake is a norm. Something has gone wrong, doesn't matter. A mistake is allowed to be taken place. There's no harm in making a mistake. A mistake can always be erased and improved upon. So we are looking for such classrooms. Now that leads to the fact that is what brain's role was. Now let's talk about heart. If I'm a selfish being, if I do not allow other person's ideas to come forth, that means my heart is somewhere constrained. So there comes the role of compassion. There comes the role of heart in education. In our classrooms, if we have to have fearless classrooms, if we want children to speak up, if we want innovative, evolved ideas to flourish, then we have to be accommodating. We have to be giving space. We have to be thinking about others before self. Service before self. So if all our children are able to do it, I think it's going to be a wonderful place. And that's what our aim is. So in our classrooms, the kind of projects, the kind of activities that we involve must involve the human component of it. Not just, see, we are all what? We are all feeling machines who think. We're not thinking machines who feel. So our emotions are very important to us. Same is there with the children, and more so, especially with adolescents. Emotions are primary for them. And then they think. So where is the role of heart? Heart is very important. And in my school, I'll just give you one example. We are all following inclusive education, and we have so many CWS and category students also in our school. Now, it's so wonderful to see how these children, more than adults, accommodate these children and help out. Just last 2019, we participated in RD parade, Republic Day parade, and the choreographer, who was from outside, said, okay, all of this, there are 200 children needed, so this child is not doing well, please, out. Now that child was crying, of course, and we couldn't say anything because it was the judgment of the teacher, choreographer. Now what happened? After around half an hour or so, 4 or 5 students got this child and said, I'm going to repeat. And they said, sir, ये इसको आपने कहा था ना इसको आता नहीं है, अब कर लीजिए इसको आता है. What they did? They collaborated, they taught that child the steps, and he could do it. So this is what is needed. The children need to help out each other, understand each other, And if they can help out each other, they'll definitely be thinking about the elders, the juniors, everybody. So this is what is needed. There comes the role of the heart. Next, the role of hand. Now, somewhere in 2006, the government came out with vocational education. It's nothing new for us. But somehow there was, because of our culture, because of our system, whatever our history has been, the work with hands is considered to be menial. But schools are feeders of society. We cannot just be giving to the society the doctors, the engineers, the astrophysicists, or the poets. We need to give to society a balanced society is needed. For that, if we do not associate importance or dignity of the labor, I think it's going to be an unbalanced society. So that is what we have to teach our children. But saying, do this, do that, nobody ever learns. Everybody shuts off. So what should we do? It should come in our day-to-day dealings, in examples. So just one example, every day we have in rotation, one class has to do Shramdan during the break. So during lunch break, what is done is, last 5 minutes, the duty list is put, 3A has to do Shramdan today. That means what? After the break, whatever is there, whatever wrappers are there, whatever packets are there, they'll just pick it up and throw it in the bin. That's it. At the end of the month, we do Shramdan, we give clean pochas and dusters to all our children, all our classmates. They clean their classrooms every day, class 9 to 12, not the smaller kids. They are told to, in the last 5 minutes, they have to put their, the seat upside down on the desk so that there's more space for cleaning, better cleaning. So these are little things. If we involve our children in, I think they'll understand and they will start respecting all kinds of jobs. Along with this, we have so many clubs, and I'm sure all schools are doing it. We are all mindfully doing it now because we know our society needs it. So whether it's gardening, whether it's needlework, and the social stigma of needlework being done by only women has gone. My boys are sewing so well. So this is Munch Crunch. Without gas, lighter, etc., they're making sandwiches, lemonade. So such clubs need to be, like we are doing it, and most of the schools are doing it. I think the education as a whole needs to be looked into, which involves head, heart, and hands. I think, thank you. I think I've answered my...
Absolutely. And one of the reasons I didn't dare stop your flows because when an academician talks, you just have to let the flow go. But it's very, very well put, the whole concept of education delivery that touches upon these three components, your head, the heart, and the hands. I'm curious to ask you one quick question. The Navy school, as I understand, mostly caters to children of the naval forces and, of course, defense forces. Do most of these children get back into the forces or do they go outside of the forces? And therefore, do you need to make some adjustments in your curriculum and the 21st century skills, as they call it? Because if they're going to get back into forces, then probably, the method has to be slightly more process-driven, as I understand. Now, am I confusing this somewhere with the kind of children who are there in your school?
No, you're absolutely right. So my school consists of more than 85% from defense forces and mostly from the Navy. But Navy doesn't mean it's only from officers. It's a heterogeneous mix. All cadres and all ranks. Children are there, so it's a heterogeneous mix. And basically, it's a public school. The school, there are 13 Navy schools all across the country. Mine is a flagship school, so we are 57 years old. And it's only on land, only one. Rest are all coastal areas. So it's like any other public school. Yes, we want to give more to our children. Some of them, maybe 10% of them, go back to forces. But that's not the only aim. What we do is we lay a lot of stress on discipline and processes. Forge means there is a pattern. But in that only, we get in, we allow the innovation creep in. And that's allowed by the whole management. That's a wonderful thing. So what extra we do, we give SSB coaching to our children, that if they choose to be going to the forces later on, fine. Otherwise, SSB involves the improvement of personality, its development of personality. So it's helpful to all kinds of children. And I'm proud to say that my children do very well after school and within the school. Thank you.
What you're also saying is that the 90% of the children who go outside of, let's say, go into the world which is not really the defense forces, also benefit from the kind of curriculum that you run in Navy school, which caters to the ones who probably go to the... So there's no need to really compartmentalize these two mixes of children, or cohorts of children.
Definitely. All children are given equal treatment. And what is Forge? Forge is a very systematic service which has the ideas. The best ideal is service before self. So what else can any school or any child need?
No.
What else can a society need?
Thank you. Thank you. I think that is good information. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
So, Abdul, I'm going to move to you. Now, interestingly, you are the group CEO of a group that, of course, has got schools, and we are familiar with that topic now. But interestingly, you also are the group CEO of a group, which also runs physical fitness centers, and they also have a platform called EduCrack, which takes care of test preps for children. And we're talking about a range of test preps, MBA to railways to UPSC and so on and so forth. As a model, very curious to understand, is there an advantage that a group has if you have all this under one, let's say, framework of delivery? I mean, do you see a better advantage for a child, for example, who goes through a group like yours, because you have also seen from the physical fitness perspective, the kind of networking, social skills, physical fitness that comes into those folks. You also have been involved in a lot of test preps, and therefore you see the trends that get in. So is there an advantage being part of a group like this, which has a bird's eye view on all these areas?
Firstly, great morning, Vinesh, and thank you for the question, and thank you to the organizers, BW Education, for having us here today. Absolutely, it gives a critical advantage to a student if they have exposure to multiple aspects, right? So we've got students all the way from KG to PG, and our role as educators is to ensure that we are inculcating in them a thought process where they are able to pursue what they are passionate about. And we need to give them the tools. We need to give them the tools and also emphasize on the importance of both mental activity and physical activity. Right? Gone is the time that we used to only speak about IQ and EQ. At one time it was only about IQ, then it came into EQ. Today, you're talking about IQ, EQ, AQ, and SQ. We need to emphasize about the social quotient, the adversity quotient. When we grew up, we always thought about what then? What does the future hold for us? Today's generation and the generations that are coming are more in the now. They're about instant gratification. What's the outcome of my learning? They want to know what's there. And I think, if you are able to give them a 360-degree landscape where they are able to first identify what do they want to do, and we do that very early with them through multiple testing, use of multiple intelligences, and finding out what are they passionate about. Learning maps are then made accordingly, and they're given exposure into the other group activities that are there. To the extent that entrepreneurship is introduced to them as early as in grade 1, so that they understand the importance of financial literacy, what is it to be done with that, and how do they manage with funds. There are multiple programs like Caterpillar to Butterfly. Then you've got a complete research mindset coming in. This allows them to both grow emotionally and mentally out there. What we've also done is we've integrated all the competitive exams into their curriculum, which allows them to, along with the curriculum that a CBSE board may set, they have exposure to the other aspects out there. So when a child is growing up, they know very well that, I want to kind of get there. And more importantly, we're kind of preparing them to be day zero entrepreneurs, day zero professionals, day zero leaders. Physical activity in terms of is a big one for us. We really encourage our students to take the lead in sports, support them through various programs, giving them access to our gyms, which is multi-fit, giving them access to that. You've got trainers, coming them. One of our students was there in the US right now competing on that stage for golf. And, she was in the top 5 that came out there. One of our students just won the under 14 tennis tournament, right? Football, name it. And it's just not limited to, let's say, outdoor, but it's also indoor activity that is there. The EdTech platform, what it does for them is allows them to, give mock tests, try their hand at it. And from my perspective is, why should a student, studying with us have to pay extra for classes outside? They are there, they are a responsibility. It's our responsibility to give them an ecosystem for everything that they want to pursue. And honestly, that's where it is. And it's all about, ensuring that, setting the thought of believing in yourself. And that's our motto, actually. Lexicon's motto is all about believing in yourself. And that's where it all starts. The foundation starts there.
This is good. This is very good. And good to hear that. I think so. What you're saying is that a package deal to all the children, right from education, basic education delivery to fitness programs to test preps. This is very good to hear. Having said that, Dr. Singh, it's interesting. While you're an academician, you represent the Vels Academy. You're also an ambassador with United Nations Sustainable Development Growth Program. And I'm sure, areas like, and you've obviously been engaging many schools to try and bring about what we need to do for UN 2030 goals. But what I'm going to, ask you is has some kind of a connection to what the previous speakers have spoken. You are a product of Oxford.
Right.
You seem to have done masters in audio production.
Yes.
And here you are in the education sector doing something very different.
Yes.
Okay. Now the question is, now just link it back. Okay. Now children who are being given all these facilities that has been spoken, there's no reason to believe that they're going to really go through the route that we have provided them. They could just be completely moving into a different sphere, like you did.
Yeah.
Right? Now, is this a reality? Do we need to prepare for this, or do we believe that, okay, let's do our bit. We have to do what we've been told to do in our schools, and then eventually the children will start to figure out a way to, break out of it and move into a different path, or continue on the same path. Given that you've been connecting with many schools, given that you've had a lot of exposure in this area, what are your thoughts on this?
First of all, thank you for that question. It has a lot of multitudes, and I'm going to start addressing them one by one. I wanted to first thank my fellow panel members. I think all of them have brought on a lot of interesting points and a lot of interesting perspectives, different sort of, work cultures and job descriptions that are coming in. So first of all, I remember your name, don't worry, I'm not looking at your name again. But Mr. Menon, you're doing a wonderful job in bringing this panel into a sort of a fruitful, streamlined discussion. First of all, it's still morning, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Karandeep Singh, and I'm going to answer his question through an anecdotal journey. Never judge the book by its cover, and there's a perfect example sitting right in front of you. As you mentioned, I did my master's way back at Oxford University and got a chance to do my CELT and DELT at Cambridge. It's been about 14 years I've been supporting Cambridge Assessment International Education as their advisor for Southeast Asia. I have been working as the United Nations ambassador to the Sustainable Development Goals. It's been supported, I've been given a lot of support by NITI Aayog, the National Institution of Transforming in India. And there is a lot of element now coming into India of private entities which were pushing in capital into, let's say, edtech or fintech, now into sustainable education. For example, we are working with the Bill Gates and the Melinda Gates Foundation, and I'm also working with Meta as we speak with Facebook. I want to give you to give a good perspective to the question, I need to give you a small anecdotal journey. See, I've been on both sides of the coin. Both sides is Indian education is owned by most of our private entities, whether it is K-12, whether it is higher ed, whether it is co-curricular, or whatever genre you want to talk about. The public education sector, which we are all theoretically hoping is going to make sense through the NEP 2020, is something that we're counting on. Now, as he rightly said, I did my master's. I was a sound engineer. Before that, I was in Australia. And moving into education, I realized actually sound engineering helped a lot. I never actually believed that, when we put ourselves in a bracket, okay, you're a teacher, you're a principal, you're the owner. See, the number one problem in our country is we have a very beautiful quality, and it's called procrastination. Even when the pandemic hit, a lot of people were like, oh, it's going to be all right, 2 years, maybe one, and things are going to go back to normal. Having also had the opportunity of heading one of the unicorn edtech companies as a CEO in Bangalore, and having worked in edtech and in K-12, I also support as a senior advisor to business schools like Voxen and ISB and ISBR. So the diversity that I have seen, and when I told you I worked on both sides of the coin, is because I know what the government is trying to do. I also know what the private entities are trying to do in this country. But the core area that we need to focus on when we talk about United Nations, let's say, sustainable goals, one of our panel members brought it up, is that we are talking about wonderful things. 21st century skills is a term that we've been harping this tune for quite a while, not just in India. Let me tell you, I've been, wherever, in whichever country I talk, we've been talking about it. But do you think that 21st century is going to end on a practical note? In the sense, are we going to see a world, you're talking about students, you're giving them education, you're all education providers, whether you're management, whether you're a principal, but do you see a child having the capability to survive this planet in the year 2030? That's my question. And the question is to you. I always, when I sit in the panel, I always love to interact. So do you genuinely feel confident that a child who might be 4 years now, turns 14 in probably the next 10 years, is capable not just to face your industry, whatever kind of industry. The industry right now is not looking at, anyways, your CV. When we hire, you might, I did my PhD from Kyoto University, Japan. It doesn't matter. I might be an Oxford product, doesn't matter. What matters is who am I? What is my skill set? So that's the problem that we're facing right now. Theoretical knowledge versus practical assimilation, and how much can I actually bring out as an individual practically, which brings me to the point of experiential learning. See, it's very easy for us to sit down, talk. It's very easy for us to come into the session, listen, appreciate, excellent. But how many of us are going to go back and actually, or how many of us are actually practically doing it? Even as Madam rightly said, even if you're doing it 2%, it is good enough. Please do it. My question again, the child that is going to face 2030 or 2034, is there even a planet? We are harping about all of these factors, but do we have a planet to live on? Have we already discovered the alternative planet where we are all shipping out into spaceships? Do we understand the pragmatic reality of climate change? This question, why I'm asking is, and I'll be very, very transparent with you, the only problem I've had, having worked on both sides, see, when I work with the government entities, there is corruption. We all understand that. When I work with the private entities, there is ego. Simple as that. See, if I am a school owner, I might be running the best curriculum like IB or Cambridge or whatever, but I might want to run it my way because it's my school. So IB and Cambridge is absolutely compromised because I own the school. So if I want to bring in a cow and put two, bed sheets on it or whatever, I'm not saying I'm not a religious person. I am a Buddhist. But if I want to do that rather than focus on the teaching and learning pedagogy, then I can do that because I'm the owner. So when principals, and I understand where they come from, I always call the sandwich theory. They're always stuck between the management and the teachers, and of course, letting the school run. And we all know for a fact, and let me tell you the inside story, during the pandemic, why every school had to say yes to EdTech is because they had to, let's face it, get the fees from the children. And how do you get the fees from the children? Who was marketing at that point? Why did Byju's become the way it did? Why was it funded? Because there was no other option for a school to survive, because a parent, we all come from a generation, I might probably look young, but I'm touching 38 this year. We come from a generation that when we did something wrong, and I remember this, it was always my fault. Now if your child does something wrong, we look at the teacher and we're like, you're in trouble. And that's the look from the principal, and the principal has been looked by the owner, you're at fault. So it's a vicious chain that has to be broken. So to come back to your point, having had the multitude experiences, when I realized 21st century skills, it has to be a balance of what all of these terminologies, the stereotypes that we talk about, blended learning, for example. See, these are here to stay. They sound good, but again, my frustration in India is how many of us are ready to actually get up and do it? And how many of us are enjoying our panel discussions and our salaries by sitting here? So if there is a child, let's say my own child is sitting here, and my wife is expecting another kid, I am genuinely scared as a father, because I don't know what world I'm going to leave them. Forget about the pandemic. It was an awakening. But if my planet is not agreeing with me as a human being, and please remember, the generation that you're handing the planet to, it is not their fault. It is the last 40 years of passive living which has been passed on to our younger generation, and they have to come up with a solution. So when you talk about 21st century skills, right now more than ever, it's a pivotal skill required, and it's not just what we call survival skill. It is about being extremely creatively vibrant, solution-focused people, not fixed-minded, growth-minded people. And it is absolutely imperative for school leaders, managements to understand that, yes, because we are private entities and we are also a mixture of government entities, let me tell you the good news. The government is genuinely realizing that it is time to work towards this area. There's a lot of capital that's been pulled in. To give you some good news, I also work as the president of the Association of Indian Principals, AIP, for Tamil Nadu. And recently, we tied up an MOU with the Western Australian government, where we're working with their tribal children, because Western Australia is technically the original place where the tribal people come from, and we are working with the tribal children in Nilgiris. And again, this is not a project which is something that you just put on paper. I'm genuinely living in my school, Vels Academy, that I head. It's not my school, by the way. I genuinely wanted to work with this school because the school is a genuine forest school. It is actually inside a forest. We have the technology that we need, but I genuinely wanted to work because I developed a forest education program certain years back. And you won't believe, the forest education program that I developed 5 years back got me an award from the Indian government, Best Principal of the Year. Awards are great. But not a single school in this country, most of the NCR schools, I know them because I've been working with some of them, would not be open to implementing a forest education program to that depth, because that's not going to get them admissions. So it's very good to talk about holistic education. It's very good to talk about experiential learning. It's very good to talk about interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary factors, but how many of you are applying it? My question is not to the kids. The kids are open to you. Even if you don't educate them, they will find a way. But if you can use this opportunity of these 10 years to somehow balance what technology has given this country and use your skills as leaders to bring in the balance of technology and education and take your schools forward, we still have a very good chance to give them a planet to survive on. And please study the stats that these scientists have been working on and talking about for the last few years. I hope I've not crossed my time, sir.
You have a bit.
I have a bit. All right, thank you.
No, but
I wanted to just tell you one small thing. The ex-president of United States, I'm sure he must have had teachers. I pity those teachers. If he can come on the international forum and say that global warming is a myth, I wonder what education is doing. If the developed part of our country is engaged in killing each other, I wonder what education is doing. See, it is a ripple effect. We don't realize when we neglect a kindergarten child. We don't realize when we tell as a society that if you get 98%, you will get this, but if you get 96%, you won't get it. So you've got to move from the sea of competition, as my fellow panelists spoke about. You've got to move from the sea of competition, you've got to move to the sea of collaboration. And the only three ways you can do that is reverence, resilience, and compassion. We need compassionate leaders. Please remember, karma is a vicious cycle. These students that you're teaching today are going to be your leaders. I took up my first principal job at the age of 29, and I was given so much of stigma by my own country. Ironically, my country says that it is important to create young, successful leaders. But when the young, successful leader was able to come out, the leader was questioned because how can a 29-year-old be a principal in a country in India? And this is, been a few years now. Now it's almost been 9 years, but I can tell you from the positive perspective, I might have used a lot of strong words in giving you, see, my objective is just to put out an eye-opener. And my objective is, there's a saying we all remember, it's not our time to sleep yet. We are all here. We are alive. So let's use our time. We have the resources. We'll have to fight to get our children a future. When you talk about 21st century skills, please also try to understand, do you have 21st century remaining with you? That's point number one. And point number two, you will have to balance technology in the way where the teacher is not replaced, but empowered. And point number three, as Mr. Menon said, you could be a banker, you could be a musician, you could be a painter, you could be a sound engineer, but you're always an educator because we are all born educators. We have to remember that. We are all born educators. We go to a doctor when we have a problem, but the child comes to us every single day, almost for the good half of their life. We are one of the most important people in their life. We have to understand our own importance in their life. So I always feel
I think that those 3 points that you said,
right,
I think is a great way to summarize the whole
absolutely,
point.
absolutely.
It's very well said. Sustainable development issues are a reality. I think climate issues are a reality. In fact, there are a lot of couples and partners who don't even want to have children. They're scared to have children. So I understand that. And you've gone through so many areas. You've gone through geographies. You've gone through sectors. You've gone through. I've not been able to keep pace actually with what you've done. Having said that, just quickly, and we've got about 9 minutes to go. Quickly, couple of quick practical stuff. So here's the situation. I'm going to open this to all of you. Sustainable development, right? So the child is aware of this. The teacher is responsible, the school is responsible, they started talking about this. That child goes home and sees his mother or father collecting vegetables in a plastic sachet.
Very important point.
Okay? And So the family is still not transitioned into that thought. Child has started to get it.
Absolutely.
How do you get this bridge
This is
between
the
the child
most,
and the teacher
This is the most important
and the
point.
parent to ensure that the reality happens?
Very important
Okay,
point,
so that's
sir.
something which I just thought I'll.
No,
you know,
that's
since I've
that's
heard
one of
you,
the most important points.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
any thoughts on this? How, because this is a reality that's, and this is not just about sustainable. I mean, you can have your child seeing a parent cross the road in the wrong way, go through the wrong side of the road, and he or she is being taught not to do these things. And one fine morning, the child is going to grow up, become that adult,
You're right.
and he or she is going to be probably confused unless there is an amalgamation of how the teacher and the parent thinks. So if any of you can just kind of pick that up, maybe starting with
Yeah, we'll go to the lady first.
the principal first. And yeah, we can just kind of, just wanted to understand this.
Yeah. So this is a real life situation. I don't know how you picked it up, but the same thing had happened in my school. So one of these days, we had a prefect. There are 34 prefects. So during break time, there was a flash mob dance. On that, there is a famous song, "Tick Tick Tick Plastic No, Say No to Plastic" song. So we played it on our PA system. So all through the school, it was playing, and everybody just crowded around these children, 34 children who were dancing away to glory, and they were very happy. And there was a festive environment, and the message that went home was no use, no plastic use. Now next day, I got 3 pairs of parents coming to me that, "Ma'am, ये क्या बात है? उसने सारे प्लास्टिक फेंक दिए. वो तो इतने सारे इतने अच्छे वाले थे." मतलब they collect, no, everybody, most of the households. So then we told them why plastic is not. And then we held an orientation program for all our parents. So the world is changing. All hope is not lost. Let me tell you all. What happens is, when children go home, they are not confused. They are convinced that this is the right way to act. And they become our ambassadors to convince the parents. So it's a beautiful situation where teachers of course know a little bit, but the parents learn from their own children. They are so happy, they are willing to learn, and the change is coming about. And that's the positive hope. Same is with the road safety groups that we have. So our children are so conscientious now. And I'm proud to say that children are bringing change. It's just for us to give them the right direction. That's what is our role now as facilitators.
And are parents starting to understand this? Is there a lot of parent engagement that's required for making these significant changes?
Absolutely. You know, see, the important part is how do you engage the parent? I'll give you a short story. So one of the biggest challenges that we face is following road rules. And I had a child who actually told his teacher, I said, I want to talk to my father to tell him not to get me from the wrong side when we are coming and we're getting late to school. Please tell him that. That's the sensitivity a child has today. If a child sees a parent shaving, for example, and they've got the tap on, you will see the child going and talking to the parent and telling them that. And as a school system, as an education system, the more you get parents involved in it, by getting them to share their stories, to talk about what they are doing differently, you'll see that kind of inculcating into various parent groups and getting advocated out there. Children today are very mindful, and children today are very, very observant. They pick on small things that you do not know that you've done, and they'll come and speak to you. As a father, I have these conversations with my child where my child will ask me the why. He'll ask me the how and what's happening out there. So the more we support that and accept the fact that the generation that is there now and that's going to come is not going to accept things the way they are going to challenge the status quo, the more we will be ingrained with them and more progressive we will be when it comes to anything, be it SDG, be it the element of their growth, the development of the country, and more importantly, connections, and more importantly, getting all the people together in what we want to do.
Great. No, thanks. And we don't have much time, but I just want to end in a way with asking you a similar kind of question. A classroom is filled, like she mentioned, with about 40 odd children. And these 40 kids can become anything tomorrow. Some of them are tuned towards becoming a scientist, some of them could be math oriented, some of them could just become a radio jockey. Given that we are having this program on transformation of technology in education, and given the fact that we need to somewhere prepare everybody for the future, the one expectation that parents have that they need to become this and get that reality into their minds. And two, is there a way that we can somewhere use AI or some kind of platform to start understanding how to really see which way the child is about to progress? And then maybe with that information start tuning your education process. I mean, why do you need to blow math into someone's mind when he's anti-math? So is that again something that can relate to what the child will become to become an adult and meet the future world?
Right.
I mean, if you have a quick brief
Sure.
understanding of this.
So first part, I think where we need to be very clear is that the relationship that the school forms with the child is unique, but it's not exclusive. It has the parent as an equal or an equivalent partner. It's not a client serving the customer and the child being the consumer in the process. And I think for a reasonably brief period of time, maybe the last 2 or 3 decades, and I think Dr. Singh mentioned that, we have seen this shift happen, that if the child did something wrong, the blame was not on the child, it's now on the school or the institution. If we engage with them as partners, probably the same traffic episode or the use of plastic episode will not be a challenge, it will be a collaboration. Likely, the same collaboration gets extended beyond when we start looking at career choices or math subject choices, etc., as not an impediment or a challenge, but as an enabler. Should math be taught? Should it become optional if I'm not interested in this career? Well, no one can be certain, and I think we have a living example here, that a career that I may opt for is where I will end up being. I mean, some of those careers may not exist 10, 20 years down the line. So is math really a subject, or is it actually a language of the future, which will allow us to talk to machines and do our
Math
jobs
is just
better?
an example.
Yes. So in any such domain, I think the challenge would be for us to work in tandem with the stakeholders. I mean, probably in the years to come, business world, when it has a webinar or a seminar like this, also has children part of it. After all, we're talking about them, right? Aren't they the biggest stakeholder in this journey? Maybe they will have wrong ideas, but then who said that we had all the right ideas? If we had, we wouldn't have been sitting and discussing it.
I think that's fair, and I think it's a very apt way of kind of summarizing what we discussed today. Before we kind of wind up, any quick questions from the audience? We've got about a minute to go. Yes, sir. If you could just address to whom you want to ask this.
Good schools are out of reach of average citizen. What we are doing for brain drain and what we are doing to money laundry in education sectors. Crores are being asked for certain courses, and as soon as those people finish their education, they start looting the public.
Yeah, popular question. The first part, I think I will allow one of you to respond to it. Brain drain. A lot of children who go through all this good education seem to be going out. Any ways that we can stop that? And I think the answer to that, if I may talk on your behalf, is to simply what I think by the end of the day today, and many seminars like this, you will realize that we have so many minds who can actually make a difference. I think my belief is that over the next few years, and with what's really happening in the globe, I think the brain drain will start to get into a reversal mode. This is my belief. As far as the second question is concerned, sir, I think we should have fairly one-to-one conversation, because I don't quite agree with you. I think it's a very strong statement to say that schools are out here to loot the public. I think it's a very strong statement. And I think there is a genuine need to, and which is one of the dilemmas of education. Education industry or the sector today is going through a dilemma of not-for-profit and for-profit. On one side, we agree that every child needs education and they have a right to education and they can't be made to pay for it. On the other side, when you want to keep giving all these very, very value-added services, technology, where does the money come from? So we have to, it's not an easy question to answer. And we might need to have some offline conversations around it, but happy to do that. But I think we've had a great session. Thank you, folks, for this wonderful session. And I must take a moment to also, Mr. Allan Andersen, who was supposed to be here and not here, he didn't come because he is having a cold and he wanted to be responsible and not be part of this crowd, assuming that it could be something else. And I think that calls, it's a responsible decision, shows responsibility, and I must thank him for that. But thank you, folks. I think it's been a great session, and a big round of applause to all of you.